Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into the complete, incredible story of Princess Diana. We're going to track her evolution from a quiet, aristocratic outsider all the way to a global humanitarian icon. This is a story that literally changed the British monarchy forever, and it absolutely captivated the entire world in the process. We're going to explore exactly how one person navigated just unprecedented fame, massive institutional pressure, and some truly severe personal struggles to ultimately carve out a legacy that, honestly, still resonates so powerfully today. I'd like to be a queen of people's hearts, in people's hearts. That brilliant quote from 1995 instantly captures the absolute emotional core of her story. She didn't really believe she'd ever be the actual Queen of England, right? But she recognized that her real power lay in empathy, in her ability to connect directly with us, the public. Historically, the monarchy was all about tradition and stoic duty. But Diana, she introduced this radical new concept, emotional accessibility. So let's jump right into section 1, the girl from Althorp, an innocent outsider. Let's step back to her beginnings, long before she became the most photographed woman in the world, just to see where all that unique empathy actually came from. Born in 1961 at Park House in Norfolk, she was part of the highly prominent Spencer family, a family with deep ancient ties to the crown. As we move down her early timeline to 1975, her father inherited his earldom, and the family moved to the massive, historic Althorp House. It was a ground but kind of isolated upbringing. Then, jump to 1977. She's 16 years old, and she literally meets Prince Charles in a plowed field on the estate. He was actually there visiting as a guest of her older sister, Sarah. At that exact moment, she was just a teenager, completely unaware of the crazy path unfolding ahead of her. Now, looking at this side by side, you can really see this vast gap in their experiences when they first met. On the left, we've got Prince Charles. He's 28, heir to the throne, completely immersed in royal duties, and feeling this intense, mounting pressure to find a suitable bride. His whole life is defined by duty. Then on the right, Lady Diana Spencer, a 16-year-old schoolgirl who was completely naive to the harsh realities of royal life. She eventually moved to London to work as a kindergarten teacher and a nanny. She was living a relatively normal, carefree life. So right from the jump, the power dynamic was heavily skewed. Moving on to section 2, a royal fairy tale and the weight of expectation. What's really fascinating about this next phase is just how quickly the public and the media built up this fairy tale narrative, basically ignoring whatever was actually happening behind the scenes. So, Charles and Diana reconnected in the summer of 1980. And get this, they only met in person about 13 times before Charles proposed in early 1981. 13 times! They barely knew each other. And during their official engagement interview, a reporter asks, "Are you in love?" Diana, super earnest, replies, "Of course." But Charles, he follows up with that now infamous caveat, "Whatever in love means." Wow, it was this glaring warning sign broadcast to the whole world, kind of planting an early seed for the emotional disconnect that would totally define their marriage. To truly wrap your head around the pressure they were under, just look at this staggering number, 750 million people. That's how many people worldwide tuned in to watch their July 1981 wedding at St. Paul's Cathedral. It was an absolutely unprecedented, monumental global broadcast. Millions packed the streets of London, but here's the reality check. Behind all that grandeur, Charles reportedly wept the night before out of doubt, and Diana was already dealing with the onset of severe personal struggles and isolation. Still, they went through with it, instantly becoming international icons. The world bought into the spectacle, but the reality was way more complex. Which brings us to section 3, behind the palace gates and the reality of Diana mania. Because behind those heavy, closed doors at Kensington Palace, the pristine fairy tale cracked pretty fast under the weight of reality. It was this really toxic mix of intense media scrutiny and severe marital isolation. Diana basically felt like a fish out of water, suffering in total silence. Everywhere they went, crowds chanted exclusively for her, what the media quickly dubbed Diana mania. And this intense adulation, it really fueled Charles's jealousy and resentment. At the same time, she was quietly battling postnatal depression and a fierce struggle with bulimia. By 1986, Charles had actually resumed his relationship with his former girlfriend, Camilla Parker Bowles. The royal couple was essentially leading separate lives, sleeping in separate bedrooms, and just putting on a brave face for the cameras. Let's look at section 4, breaking the silence, taking back the narrative.
As the marriage undeniably fell apart in the early 90s, Diana realized something absolutely crucial. She had to take control of her own public image before the establishment defined it for her.
So, how exactly did she pull that off? Facing a traditional royal family that pretty much viewed her as a rogue threat, how did the princess reclaim her voice? Well, she essentially went rogue herself. In late 1995, she covertly smuggled cameras into her sitting room under the guise of installing a new hi-fi system. This secret setup led directly to the explosive BBC Panorama interview where she dropped this absolute bombshell. There were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded. Just wow. This stunning admission shocked the globe. Over 200 million people worldwide watched in stunned silence as a sitting royal confirmed her husband's infidelity and her own. She spoke openly about her mental health and eating disorders, breaking literally every royal protocol in the book. The impact was so devastating that just a month later, Buckingham Palace announced the Queen had officially advised them to divorce. The fairy tale was legally over. But we absolutely have to step back and note how that landmark interview actually happened. Decades later, the 2021 Dyson inquiry officially proved that BBC reporter Martin Bashir used deceitful, fabricated bank statements to manipulate Diana's brother, Earl Spencer. He essentially tricked them into thinking people close to Diana were spying on her. This intense psychological manipulation heavily influenced her decision to speak out right then. Now, Diana later stated she didn't regret the interview itself, but the BBC did formally apologize, acknowledging a complete breach of editorial conduct just to secure the scoop of a generation. Section 5. The Humanitarian Princess, Finding Her True Calling. Out from under those strict royal constraints and the confines of her marriage, she really began to harness her unparalleled global media presence to champion the people society often rejected. She completely understood that the paparazzi followed her every single move, right? So she decided to leverage them for a cause way bigger than herself. In January 1997, she physically walked through an active minefield in Huambo, Angola, wearing just a ballistic helmet and a flak jacket. Those stunning images were broadcast everywhere, literally forcing the world to look at a devastating humanitarian crisis they'd largely ignored. She brought unprecedented awareness to the movement to ban anti-personnel landmines, and her bravery had a lasting impact. Today, that very minefield is a bustling community with a school named in her honor. This was when she truly found her independence. As patron or president of over 100 charities, she used her immense fame to shine a light on leprosy, homelessness, and children's hospitals. But honestly, one of her most defining moments was in the late 80s and early 90s when she deliberately shook hands with HIV and AIDS patients without wearing gloves. During a time of intense global fear, misinformation, and prejudice, that one simple human gesture single-handedly broke down massive global stigmas. She wasn't just cutting ribbons, she was physically engaging with the marginalized. She proved empathy is a profoundly effective tool on the world stage. Which leads us, sadly, to Section 6, Tragedy and Enduring Legacy, the final chapter. Tragically, her newfound freedom, her independence, and her incredibly impactful humanitarian work were cut devastatingly short in the late summer of 1997. Let's look at the timeline of that fateful night in Paris because it moved tragically fast. Leaving the Ritz Hotel just past midnight on August 31st with Dodi Fayed, her vehicle was involved in a devastating high-speed crash in the Pont de l'Ama tunnel while being aggressively chased by swarms of paparazzi on motorcycles. Despite hours of intense emergency surgery at a nearby hospital, Diana was pronounced dead at 3 a.m. British summertime. She was only 36 years old. It was a sudden, shocking event that triggered an absolute, unprecedented outpouring of global grief. The world virtually stopped. Now, to address the years of swirling speculation and conspiracy theories that immediately followed her death, we can look at the official public records. Multiple major investigations were launched over the next decade. The French inquiry in 1999, the UK police's extensive Operation Paget, and the British inquest in 2008. And they all firmly concluded the same thing. There was no evidence of a conspiracy. The detailed findings consistently point to the same tragic facts: gross negligence by the driver, Henri Paul, who was severely intoxicated, the dangerous high-speed pursuit by the paparazzi, and the fatal reality that the passengers in the back of the Mercedes were not wearing seatbelts. Following a deeply emotional state funeral watched by roughly 2.5 billion people around the globe, literally one of the biggest television events in history, she was laid to rest. The burial took place on a secluded, private island located on a lake at her childhood home of Althorpe. As her brother, Earl Spencer, noted, they chose that island because it was the safest and most beautiful place to bury Diana, away from the public gaze, but where her grave could be visited in privacy by her family. It was a highly symbolic choice, finally granting her the absolute peace and privacy that was so fiercely and cruelly denied to her in life. Which brings us to a final thought for you to consider. From an innocent young aristocrat thrust into a global fishbowl to a fiercely independent humanitarian icon, how did one woman's immense empathy permanently shift the world's expectations of power and royalty? I mean, the royal family fundamentally changed how it interacts with the public entirely because of her. And her blueprint for charity, compassion, and hands-on activism, it continues to influence public figures today. It's this remarkable, complex story of taking a massive spotlight you never asked for and using it to illuminate the darkest corners of the world. So how will her legacy continue to shape our world next?